So good evening. Welcome to the joint meeting of the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District School Committee, the Whitman Board of Selectmen, the Hanson Select Board, the Hanson Finance Committee, and the Whitman Finance Committee. If you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just like to remind people or inform people that this meeting is being broadcast live and will be recorded. John and I have mics up here, and hopefully you can hear us. We do have a portable mic if folks have questions or comments or for later on. We just didn't want to put mics on every table. Tonight's goal, or my goal for tonight, is to give both boards, the Select Board in Hanson, both FinComs, the Select Board in Hanson and Whitman Selectmen, an overview of what the regional school district budget looks like. This is a preliminary overview that I shared with the school committee December 21st, right before the winter break. And feel free, again, this is a prelim document. It's going to be kind of two parts. You have two pieces of information. One is a presentation, which I'll speak through, and then the financials that John will speak to. Everything will be on our website. I believe it already is. We really didn't make any adjustments from the December 21st meeting. And again, this is prelim, so we had to make some estimates going forward. I also am going to ask both boards, the Whitman Selectmen and the Select Board in Hanson, to offer some grace as we present these documents going forward. As you know, we've had some technical issues dating back to July, and we are knee-deep, neck-deep in W-2s right now to make sure our employees get their tax documents prior to the 31st of January. So John has been working diligently to get that done, and he will then be working on the financial documents in preparation of our February 1st meeting. So if you just follow along in my presentation, so it's a prelim presentation. We really focus in on our mission statement, and for the public, the mission statement of the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District is committed to providing each student with a high-quality education that promotes student success and responsible citizenship. This year, we are actually in the process of working on a new 5-year strategic plan for the regional school district, with hopes to be approved by school committee in June of 2023. The school committee focus areas outside of the superintendent's goals in 22-23 were tuition-free full-day kindergarten, a one-to-one personal device for each student, and a robust related arts program, K-8. We were successful. Thank you to both communities for supporting tuition-free full-day K last May. We were also successful in making sure each student had a device. Chromebook, for those out there that are curious about what the device was. We were not successful necessarily in putting forth a robust K-8 related arts program. We are still in motion of that with a goal this year to potentially put it into the FY24 budget, which is the next page. Focus areas this summer. School start times, and school start times, if they are adjusted, will have a financial impact to the FY24 budget. Innovation pathways in early college, which is really a study in what we are doing in the regional school district to promote education and alternative pathways for students at the high school level. This is no financial impact to the district, and if you watch last night's school committee meeting or look at the program of studies presented by Dr. Jones, you will see progress towards innovation pathways and new courses that will be offered to our students at the high school. Again, I mentioned robust related arts program. That has a financial impact. And again, if I reference last night's school committee, 4 out of the 5 members of the regional school committee student advisors to the school committee spoke of foreign language and the need to put it back in the middle school. This budget necessarily that you see in front of you does not have that in it, and that's why I say it's prelim. It's going to be up to the school committee to have that discussion moving forward into the spring to see if it's a bullet point that we need to add some sort of related arts or foreign language in the middle school. And then our fourth goal was to really review our culture and climate in the district, which has no financial impact, but really making sure that every student has an equitable experience or similar like experience in both communities, K to 22 or pre-K to 22, because again, for folks out in the public, we service kids 18 to 22 in a vocational program based upon their need. FY24 budget proposal and goals and purpose. To support students' educational needs and the district's operational needs. This is a level service budget as presented. We are not adding any additional staff. We are in this budget hopefully reutilizing retirement funds to be able to fund staffing positions that are currently in ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, which ESSER 2 is expiring and ESSER 3 will expire in September 30th of 2024. So I have one more year of government one-time money. So we are trying to move in this budget without adding to the budget based upon retirements, moving those folks over because they serve a critical need for our students. Maintaining current staffing levels from pre-K to 12, and I say again, /18 to 22, based upon, and you will see at the February 1st budget, our class sizes are better than they ever have been, and our students are achieving more than they have in the past. I think it's a direct correlation to the support of the communities for our budgets, which have lowered class sizes and have given teachers opportunity to service our students in more one-to-one than they have had in the previous budget cycles, dating back to the time when I arrived here in 2010. Continue to address academic, social, and emotional regression due to COVID-19. I mentioned students that were successful. We still have students that are recovering, especially in the social and emotional area. And if you ask any educator and basically any parent out there, their students have had some detriment due to the limitations of social experiences during the pandemic. In our district, it has led to more behaviors, more trips to the adjustment and guidance counselors, just to reset. So we need to continue to support those students who walk through our doors every day. Provide special education programming to retain students in the district. Over the past 5 years, we've done, I think, an outstanding job of making sure that every child has had the experience, or we provided them a service in district for their special needs or accommodations. Sometimes we can't fulfill that, and that's when we send our students out to either a collaborative, which is a collaborative, special education collaborative is a unification of multiple districts. We are in multiple collaboratives. One is called the North River Collaborative, one is called the South Shore Collaborative, the Pilgrim Area Collaborative, and we hope to be involved in the, now I'm gonna blank, one more collaborative. When we send our students to collaboratives, our tuition is lesser, or it's a less expense to the district budget because we are involved in the collaborative. The only thing that we need to do for the collaborative really is if the collaborative needs space and we can provide space at a tuition rate or a rental rate, we do, and I have to serve on 4 boards of directors, so it's 4 additional meetings a month.
Was that Reed's?
Reed's, thanks Steve. And Steve Boyce serves on the Pilgrim Area Collaborative as a board member. Provide English learners the support they need for success. This is big, and I think it's needs to be a discussion point, as it was discussed by some students last night at school committee again. The culture of our district is changing. The demographic of our district is changing. When I arrived here in 2010, I believe there were 7 ELs, English learners in the district. We have close to 200 today. They require a certain level of assistance, meaning teacher, and we, in last year's budget, we, through ESSER funds, added 2 additional staff members to support those students who are based primarily right now at Conley and Duval. That level has leveled off this year. We haven't seen the increase that we saw last year. Excuse me. But we still have to provide those services. Those students aren't going anywhere. However, as they progress through the district, their need might change from EL to former EL. And that'll be a discussion point again on February 1st. Address school start times, again, that goal. There's a discussion around moving our start times and aligning our elementary schools to a similar start time. And if I can refresh the folks in this audience memory, in 2012-13, the district was in a financial crunch. Start times were moved to save approximately $480,000 from the district budget involving transportation. The middle schools start times were similar but adjusted. The high school start time went from 7:25 to 7:05, which is the earliest in the state of Massachusetts. And the elementaries were all shifted from one similar start time to 3 different start times. That has caused some discussion over the past 10 years to see what we can do to either increase the start time or make the start time later at the high school, and also align the elementary schools so that we can do professional development across the district instead of staggering it. That will have a financial cost. However, the piece of that is in 2012, regional school transportation was earmarked at about 65%. We're getting close to 90 to 95% currently. So if we do expend money for start times with transportation, the fact is we can pretty much count on most of it coming back 96 cents on the dollar next year. And then add K-8 related arts. It's a proposal we have out there. We will propose it at the school committee on February 1st. Enrollment trends, and I know enrollment's a big deal, and you will have documentation on the website after the 1st from NESDEC, which is our affiliation who does our enrollment projections. Our enrollment projections after this year are, again, maintaining. If you noticed, from 2017 on, we've dropped students. During the pandemic, we also dropped students to go to private and to homeschool. Some of those students are coming back. It looks now, based on my October 1st data, we have 3,541 students in the district, and that doesn't mean that that's part of the 60-40 split. That's what we have in district on our rolls right now. Some of those students might be choice students somewhere else, but they're still affiliated to our district. The 34, or last year for FY23, the state came back with the number of 3442, which is different than the 3556 that you see at 2022. So giving that estimate based upon those numbers, we should come in something similar to 3442 this year, and that will determine the 60-40 split. Budget assumptions, and I want to clarify that these are assumptions at this point because in our finance department we haven't rolled over exacts for FY24. So salaries and expenses, John put in at 3%. Those necessarily aren't 3% across the board. Our contracts and our association, our collective bargaining units did not settle for that at this point. However, we earmarked it because of steps and lanes. We want to make sure we don't underfund or under budget in our salaries and expenses. Hold harmless, which John can speak to a little bit more, and we've talked about hold harmless quite a bit. A 5% increase to towns' required contributions, non-mandated busing, and in the budget documents, you can see the non-mandated busing as calculated on December 21st, 2022. The town split right now, based upon our numbers, is a 60.61 split for Whitman, and 39.39% for Hanson, again, hypothetical. Debt, which is in the budget packet that John wants to reference a little bit later on. And then in this budget, our goal was, again, to provide the best education for our students within the limitations of what we perceive is a reasonable budget to present to the communities. And a reasonable budget we spoke about last year in our budget subcommittee is a potential 3% increase to the district budget, based upon everything that's included. The state kind of threw a curveball to us with some proposals from the Operational Services Division, or OSD, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for Executive Administration and Finance. They set a 14% inflation factor for cities and towns beginning July 1st, 2023, for all private and public placements or placements for our out-of-district students. That has a $658,000 impact to this budget. There's been conversations with our representatives right now, and there's also conversations, on Beacon Hill, and also with the governor's budget. And I want to pump the brakes a little too. Usually we get the governor's budget by the last week of January. The governor's budget won't be prepared for us by March 1st. Now, I know we can make some assumptions, and we're making some assumptions here, but I'm very curious about the 14%. Just to let you know, on average, FY11 was a 0.75% increase, FY12 was 1.69%, 13 was 2.13, 14 was 1.80, 15 1.53, 16 1.40, 17 1.83, 18 1.15, 19 2.33, 20 1.63, 21 2.72, 22 2.26, 22 2.54, 14. Okay? So just, again, letting you know that, that's outside of the realm of the regional school district. And if we were to move things around and support that, we would probably have to lose some services, letting the towns know that. Now, on the positive side, and I'm cautiously optimistic, based on circuit breaker, we should be able to recoup those funds for the FY25 budget, but that doesn't affect us today. Next page over, just an overview of the final budgets that were presented by this regional school district dating back to FY15. Budgets and increase, and I'll just focus on the increase today. FY15 was a 1.67 increase, FY16 was 0.82, FY17 3.04, 3.42 in 18, 19 was 3.77, 20 was 3.77, FY21 was 5.52, 2.67 in 22, 2.98 in 23, and we're looking right now at a 4.19 at this point. Mr. LaMattina.
The 22 and 23 increases include ESSER and CARES Act money.
They do not, correct? Am I correct? They do not. That was LEA budget. That was not one-time money from the government. Ms. Kevin.
I'm wondering, and maybe it's later in the package, so we get the budget, but do we have a summary of the spend for each of those years versus the budget?
So a spend for those years?
Which would include ESSER and any other?
So ESSER, the budget from last year is still on our website. I don't have the one-time money back to 21. But I can look for those documents and make sure that they're out on the website so you can see what was allocated in special education grants, because again, ESSER and we didn't get CARES, it was ESSER money. CARES money came through the towns, and then special education grants in Title I, Title II, Title III grants. We presented that last year, and it is on the website. It will be in the February documents for FY24, and if we need to go backwards, we can go backwards for those documents. Additional work that we're doing currently right now, we're working with the budget subcommittee. The budget subcommittee was formed last year, or maybe almost 2 years now, time flies, to assist me in the budget presentation for the public, and also looking at our 5-year plan and all the odds and ends that go through. I think we developed a 5-year plan that has been presented to the committee. Their charge, dating back from December to now February, is to assist me in what type of presentation we should be giving the public and what type of documents are needed to sustain and answer the questions that could come from boards or from the public. Use ESSER 3 funding and refresh our plan to absorb that personnel, as I mentioned before. Update assumptions to actuals for February 1st, and solidify expenses related to instructional support needs. And I had a conversation with Mr. Small a few prior to this meeting. That specifically pertains to paraprofessionals. During COVID, we had a boom of support staff that we needed, basically when we were virtual and hybrid, and we had a virtual school, literally, figuratively going during COVID. We had 500 plus students that were home and just attending school virtually outside of the hybrid, and we are working to really structure how we use our paraprofessionals moving forward in the budget. So that's the solidify instructional support needs. Our timeline, and I spoke to Mr. Anderson a little bit about our timeline. December was a presentation to the committee. We had a meeting last night. We didn't discuss budget last night. I know probably the last time at a school committee until March, end of March, or even May. Today we're here, and again, thank you for coming. February 1st, we will present the public hearing on our budget. February 15th is our next school committee meeting. March 1st, the governor's budget is released. I'm looking at the month of March and April to be busy. March 8th is a school committee meeting if needed, earmarked. March 15th is the school committee meeting as listed. March 16th is when we are going to vote our budget assessments to the towns. And in our past, George and mine, we've always met through April on budget, so we anticipate an April 15th school committee meeting, which is set, an April 26th school committee meeting if needed, and then a May 1st town meeting where budgets will be voted and approved, hopefully. The next page is the non-mandated busing calculations that we switched from last year. The mileage-based calculations for non-mandated helped us, I think, and moved our reimbursables to a larger number to the state. Hopefully the state's not listening to me right now, and deferred some of the costs from the towns for our transportation. I briefly will say that the district is working on new transportation guidelines for our students that I hope to roll out at the February 15th meeting to help folks in district understand who we bus, where we bus, and the cost of that bus. The regional agreement team met, and that's also a topic of conversation as far as transportation. And transportation is listed in the regional agreement, and it is very vague. So we are trying to solidify that and hopefully come up with a plan that will be beneficial to the students of our communities and understood by both towns on what the actual costs are. So the non-mandated calculations are actually, I think, John, in the packet as they go. The next piece are the assessments. And John, I'm going to just pop that over to you if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you. Before we get to the assessments, this is a packet that everybody has. I can't see, okay. Everybody has, it's 21 documents of varying length. I can go through these real quickly and just explain what they are if anyone has any questions, or maybe think about what they are and maybe have questions for later on or whatever you'd like to do. The first page is the general fund revenue expenditure summary. It just looks, it's a small print, but it's the revenues that come in and then the expenditures, and this is just the general fund budget. And it goes on for 3 pages. Sorry, how about that? Okay. So revenues and expenditures on a summary pages for 3 pages. The next document is document number 2. It's a general fund revenue detail. It shows the assumptions that we made on every budget line, and it has actuals appropriated through 23. I only have actuals through July for this year. The budget as of tonight, the increase and the decrease. And that's where you would get the increase over last year of what the operating assessment would be. If you look at the top there, again, under this very early scenario, Hanson's operating assessment would be 7.88%. Whitman's operating assessment would be 8.52%. That's how to read the document there. The next group of, it's 9 pages, are a breakdown of every line item in the general fund budget, the actuals, the encumbrances, the appropriated, and then the budget. And again, they reflect mostly a 3% increase in just as a placeholder until we can fill in with better numbers as we go forward. Again, it's early. Document 4 is just 4 through 10 are just breakdowns by school. So it's the expenditure summary, expenditure detail broken out by school. So if you want to see by each school, I'm skipping around, I'm moving quickly. If you want me to stop, please let me know. The next document is document 12. And it's a breakdown of special education related revenues and expenditures. Last year, the through discussions about circuit breaker, this page was inserted so to give more of a enlighten a little bit more about what goes on with circuit breaker and how it's being used in the budget. So again, that's the circuit breaker page. And that goes on for 2 pages. And then I have just graphs as of right now. Of course, these will change, but they're a general fund revenue by town, the type, and then general fund revenue by type, general fund expenditures by function, general fund expenditures by type. Again, I like pie charts. They work for me. If they don't work for you, please let me know. I'll put it in whatever format works for you. Document 17 are debt assumptions. The superintendent's going to be meeting with both towns to kind of go over these. I have to start somewhere with debt assumptions. And these are the debt assumptions I've started with. We can always change them depending on whether either town wants to change the assumptions. But I have to start with something, and this is where I started. I could go through it if you like. Document 18 and 19 are the non-mandated and mandated busing calculations. Document 18 is the breakdown for fiscal year 24 as of right now. Document 19 is a comparison of this year to last year. Again, I could go over it. Document number 20 is the operational assessment methodology and the capital assessment methodology. And these are just the step-by-step how we come up with every number. And that's it. That's all I have right now. There are going to be more documents for the February 1st hearing. There are different things that we used last year that I haven't come up with yet. I haven't created them for FY24, but I will. We've gotten some great feedback from the Budget Subcommittee of what documents to include, how to tweak some of the documents we have. I'm trying to work that in so that make sure we have a presentation that everyone can understand and get something out of. And I went quickly, but that's all I've got. So any questions or?
Does anyone have any general questions that we can answer now specific to this? Ms. Otina?
Do I need a microphone?
Yeah, I think you can just yell. I'll repeat it if I can't hear it.
So I spent multiple hours this past weekend working on these budget documents because they were available on the website. And I appreciate having the information ahead of time. So $60 million budget is a challenge to understand from an outside. And so I've identified 4 areas where the budget has major increases, and I know this is incredibly coded now. And the biggest dollar figure is the $1 million raises, the 3% across the board, and I know it's preliminary. So that's $1 million, and that will change. But the second item that I found that I would like some information on is $850,000 in the line items 5,000 through 5,999. So total benefits and fixed charges, and that's a big company. And I don't have any real familiarity with what those lines represent and why that increase is so significant. It looked like it'd be some retirement money went up like $300,000. And I heard you say I'm going to use that to shift salaries from SO2, SO3 over the course of time. Could you comment on that? And then I'll just list the other 2, which is the $300,000 restoration of the curriculum development, which used to be in the budget, was taken out, and it has to go back in. The curriculum needs to be replaced. I don't know, with George's, I'm sure this is something.
Thank you,
George, for making sure that happens. And then the last is the $240,000 for the transportation via language. So those are the 4 big items, and they add up to almost a $2.4 million increase. So it's the $850,000 that I don't have any understanding whatsoever.
Do you have a?
Sure. I'm looking at document number 3 on page 8. The 5,000s to the 599s are total employee retirement, total employee separation costs, and insurance programs. So we can go one by one if you want, but okay, so employee retirement, I put a 10% increase in. Last year's increase for MTRS and Plymouth County were 9.8, I think. So that's why I put 10% in there. So that's the $344,000. The insurance salary reserve, if you look at the actual, these are, the major part of this is when people retire, the payouts that people get for buybacks and things like that. If you look at FY22's actuals, again, it's not audited, it's just preliminary right now, but we had $747,057.85 in actual costs in that line. So I went to $700,000 to try to get closer than $460, which was budgeted this year. It's woefully underfunded. So that's a $240,000 increase to the budget, but it's more in line with what will probably happen again, as that's what happened last year. The other grouping of insurance programs, most of those were just 3%. I have 5% in for health insurance. I don't know what the health insurance will be. They haven't come up with a final number. That's something that could change once we get real numbers. That's $238,000 of that group. So I don't know if that answered it, but okay.
And as far as the salary, that'll be adjusted. The curriculum, as when we presented this at the school committee meeting, it was recommended by the committee not to be an initiative, but actually placed back in the budget. We haven't changed the documents yet. So it says initiative, it's going back in the curriculum line. And also the transportation, or that's the realignment piece. My recommendation would be to the committee to potentially use one-time funds such as E&D and not have that as an actual in the budget. That would be my recommendation. Sean.
Yeah. I attended a couple of the budget subcommittee meetings, and there's a lot of this that I really appreciate. The financial documents that you put together are really helpful, and I appreciate how that was done. I would like to speak about the timeline, though, that you spoke about, or the timeline that you have scheduled out. I do respectfully disagree with the way the budget is being rolled out. For me, when I'm looking at the best practices on DLS and the Mass Municipal and on, through the finance committee handbook, what I'm reading is it says we should do a forecast. We should have a revenue forecast and we should have an expenditure forecast. And then what it says is that we should come together, people in this room, and we should come to consensus about what then we're going to do about revenue. Where we're at with revenue and come up with a consensus about how we should spend our money. And then we should build our budget. What seems to be happening is that you did a financial forecast, and then you presented a budget that is not in line, not even that it's not in line, that we didn't have any sales. We didn't come to consensus and say, we should spend this amount, we should spend this amount, we should look for an override, and it's gonna, we know that we're short money, but the services are really critical, so we collectively agree for an override, or, money's really tight and we need to spend down. You just presented a budget, and I spoke about this on Tuesday night as well on Whitman. I feel like that does create tension within the community, because when you present a budget that is admittedly, not within the confines of what we can afford in our revenue projections, then it doesn't fit with what the best practices tell us. It creates tension within the community, it creates tension with other departments. If I was on the police department or the fire department or DPW and I see the number come out at over 8%, I'm thinking, geez, that's definitely anxiety inducing, because where's that money going to come from? We've kind of thrown out the 5% as a rough watermark for what we can afford within the levy to not have to go to an override. So anything over 5%, obviously, it's got to come from somewhere. That means other departments are now at odds. Whereas if we come together after in the late fall, after we have our forecast, and then we come to consensus about how we want to spend the money, that might be a powerful meeting. And then we come to consensus about it, then we then go build our budgets. That to me is proactive. It alleviates a whole lot of tension, and it keeps us all on the same page. But if we flip-flop those two steps, and we build our budgets first, and then we come together, all of a sudden we're now at odds with each other, because how are we going to pay for this? When I see the 8%, is your intention to say that you would like an override?
This right now is a preliminary budget. This is without actuals. I don't know. I appreciate your comment, Sean. What I would like to get is the budget forecast from both communities, because that hasn't been presented to me in 2 years. So I would engage in a joint meeting, but I don't know what the budget forecast is in both communities at this point. And I don't know what that would mean for both towns as far as an override. I don't know. All I know is we went round and round with the report a couple years ago and about a potential override being in fiscal 2021. But I would engage in conversation in October about what the towns can afford before I present the budget. But I haven't been invited or given a perspective of what the towns can afford, except maybe a 5, this is where we are at 5% as an assessment. This is where I am right now today, based on projections that we put together. Knowing how our budget process is, it's probably going to change, and then based upon what the towns can afford and what pieces of the pie, the acronym, the suggestion we used to talk about, what other departments, what their increases are as far as percentage. And what I talked about early on is our budget subcommittee had talked about a 3% increase of the budget. I'm over that right now. I understand that. There's a reason for that, and maybe we have to fix that based upon the 14% unexpected charges in special ed. But I was targeting a 3% increase this year, which I think is a fair increase for our district budget. And I'm not prepared to go back and forth on the spot on an override. I'm just not prepared to do that.
I would just respectfully say, I think we should refer back to best practices and fall in line with that, because that does kind of ask that we do have some of those important questions early, as opposed to building our budgets out and then being reactive. I'm frustrated with the process, to be honest. I think there are some major positives that have come out of the budget subcommittee and how thorough you guys have been, but I feel like this is a big step backwards, and I feel like there's going to be tension moving forward within the community with the 8%. I just don't see how we can realistically afford it. So if we're not going to talk about realistically like the solutions to that, should it be an override or shouldn't it be, we're just going to kick the can down the road and have real heated discussions, in the weeks before time, and that always goes terrible. I'd rather be proactive than reactive. I guess that's what.
Mr. Lamontina.
Well, I would respectfully disagree that you haven't been told where we are. Close to 3 years ago now, the town set fiscal policy which set up to a 5% limit on the school and 2.5% to other departments. We've not moved off of that. In fact, I believe Whitman members of the school committee have consistently reminded you of that. And I think recently in one of the meetings, they even gave an estimate of what our potential revenue would be this year. So it's been year after year since we set that policy that it seems the understanding falls on you, Mr. Simonak, because you haven't gotten it right yet. It's up to a 5% assessment. And what those fiscal policies do, it enables us to live off of the amount of money we're taking in. The amount of money we just asked for in this budget is more than the town takes in to run the entire town. So I don't know where this goes from here. It's not just a number in the sky that we throw up. That up to a 5% assessment basically puts you in line with 2.5% based on the size of your budget, of a $60 million budget. My other question regarding what Mr. Sandroff went through would be how many positions last year were created using one-time funds? And where are they now in this package?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I'll have that in February. You can shake your head, but I will have that in February for you. This was a prelim, and I will show where those are moving from the current staff that are retiring based upon their salaries. Ms. Otina?
You just said you have 700,000 of retirement that you have to date and put in 797, I believe. So, if you know you had 700,000, how many retirements was that?
That was the FY22 actual in that line item. The total of everything that comes out of that line was 7 something, yes. So
Could you tell me how many positions were created last year, one time in the past?
right now, no. I don't have that in front of me, no. I could go look it up.
It would have been nice to have this year.
Yes, Ms. Otina.
As long as there's no one else waiting for their first shot at this, I want to reset this discussion, because this is a preliminary meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm on the Whitman Finance Committee, and we've had 3 meetings now, and no one has come in with a 2.5% budget increase. We've had budget increase on the town side of 12, 15%. I could see more coming in significantly higher than 2.5%. And we'll have, cordial discussions with the budget managers, and we'll work with the Board of Selectmen and the budget managers on the town side. So I think the tone that's beginning to escalate in this room needs to be ratcheted down, that we have to start somewhere. As I said, I spent hours over the weekend trying to figure out where is this budget building for $2.4 million. I gave the 4 discrete items that add up to $2.4 million, and it's going to be a ton of movement. So I agree with Sean that we should follow best practices and we should start sooner, but we didn't. So in January, this is not the time to say we should have been meeting in October. We didn't. So let's just go forward with a budget that recognizes that the towns can't afford this, but the school committee, the 10-member school committee, and the administration, and I really appreciate this information, will work on this knowing that this is more than the towns can afford. But the budget managers for the town side also have to appreciate that their requests are going to throw us into a significant override position as well. So it's not a school override and an override. It's let's everybody take a look at what money is available, make decisions that reflect what is in the best interest of the taxpayers and the students in reverse order of importance, in my opinion, and move forward in a collaborative spirit, not an adversarial spirit, which I sense in my gut is beginning to build up, and we don't need that because we're all good people who work really hard to do the right thing for everybody. And you just gave us these documents, which are filled with a ton of information, and you're going to spend another month, working on it with the school committee and the administration, and then we'll come back and we'll revisit it. But I'd like to ratchet this down.
Fred?
I know I said it in past meetings of ours, we do have the parameter of an up to a 5% increase in the assessments of the town based upon the Madden report for the town of Whitman. Using that parameter, what I don't want to see happen is if our needs are greater than that they get thrown into a trash can. And I think that we need to be starting now and having the discussion sooner rather than later, knowing that the town can't find money out of a rock. They're not going to be able to squeeze it and just shake the trees and find extra funds. But if we establish what the town can afford based upon the parameters we've been given, and then we make our case, these are what our needs are in this order, and we go to the taxpayer. If we have to have an override, we let the taxpayer decide. Do we want to advance for the children? Do we want to advance for education? And this is what it's going to be spent upon. But I think the sooner that we could have that discussion, the better. Because all of a sudden it's March or April and, we'll have to worry about that next year. I'd rather see a plan put in place as early as possible so that we can, be able to move forward.
Don?
Jeff, I have a follow-up question on the initiative last year we had of the Chromebooks. So we did use E&D of $400,000. Is there a line item placeholder with this current preliminary budget to add those devices into the operating budget right now?
Right now, we won't have to refresh till FY26.
Okay.
So we're working on different things. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I want to communicate that we are not putting that into the budget this year.
Correct.
That's not in your proposal right now, but that is an important piece of our initiative that going forward at some point it will need to be a part of this too.
Correct.
So to recognize that we're not, we used 400 E&D, but we're not putting that in the budget.
Correct. Chris?
So kind of follow up with Sean's, the way
look at that, Sean, I'm listening at home, I'm hearing this. The reason we haven't met is because the school committee hasn't, made a point. I'm not sure that that's what you meant or, what you want. So, maybe you can clarify.
Sure, Sean.
My simple clarification would be, I think we should follow the best practice that the state lays out for us. We should start with revenue based on our projections. We should have that conversation first. Come to consensus about what we're going to do. If it's above 5% and you want 8%, we should have that discussion and collectively agree, okay, it's going to be 8%, therefore it's going to be an override, because we have determined, roughly speaking, that above 5% for us, I'm not talking for Hanson, but for Whitman, otherwise it's going to come from another department. We can't do that. So that would be an override. So we should have that conversation first, then you should go build your budget. You should not build your budget without any budgetary limits, because obviously department heads that don't have limits are just going to build based on their need, and their strategic plans to see their strategic plan out. So they're going to build out a budget without restricted, budgetary guidelines, and then we're all going to come together and we have almost a $2 million shortfall, and then we're fighting on how the hell we're going to make it up. We should just have the proactive conversation first, then go build the budget. And it's not so much about starting early, it's really about having the critical discussion first, then moving forward. I think that's a real critical piece.
Chris?
I absolutely agree with you. I would support that 100%. My point is, it sounds like it hasn't happened with the school committee or the superintendent or administration. That's what I'm trying to clarify. I'm not putting words on, I'm asking the clerk.
The people that we need to do.
Yes.
Yes. Collectively, we need to do that.
Correct.
They say the selectmen, the finance committee, and the school committee should come together and have those discussions. So no, I don't mean to put it on the school committee. I mean, collectively, we should do that as a whole.
Chris?
Yeah, so a couple things. So, Kathleen, I appreciate the comments. I think, so if you think about why we're here, how we got here, right, we started some conversations at the end of last year, and Jeff, you and I have gone to the select board and select board, and kind of talked about the budget process and kind of laying out this plan of having a joint meeting. So I think this is the first step, but whether it's Sean's point or anyone else's point, we can have further conversations about what works and how we do it. We're not have to stick in this format. I do like where you're going in terms of we got to kind of all get on the same page. I think one of the pieces that I would encourage everyone to not get lost in this is the assessment numbers are sometimes a little tricky, right? We have assessment numbers in both towns. For the school, right, from our perspective, ultimately it's that budget increase number that's relevant. And Laura, I think, made a good point. We need to look at expenses outside one-time money. We can follow up on that. But at the end of the day, we look at our budget as a whole, and what is the budget increase? Because we can't control that assessment school. And what town's going to be a little higher, and what town's going to, we can't control any of that. That's just a state formula. The only thing we can look at is, here's our budget expense, and here's what we think it needs to go up. In terms of every other department, to me, I think, personally, if I'm going to speak with me, just for myself, I do think there should be some equity. Right? I do think that should be somewhat consistent, but to me, the number that needs to be consistent isn't this 4 or 5 or 6% increase in the assessment, it's the absolute budget number. And as we've also talked about, that budget number is tough just because the funding comes from the towns. I mean, St. John's is one of those nice pie charts, right? You can see how much we're getting in increased state revenue and how much comes from the towns. So I agree. I think the more we can have some of these conversations and figure it out, the better. And I do think it's important, at least for me, to understand what are some of the other departments looking at. So the department is saying, if we're looking at equipment and Hanson, and I average they're going up, let's say 1.5%, personally, I'm not really comfortable with the school budget that's going up 4%. Conversely, if the town departments are increasing 3.5%, 4%, I'm really not excited about a school committee budget that's going up 1%, because that just doesn't feel right. So to me, I just hope we consider the budget increase and kind of, yes, we all have to understand the assessment increase, but the key number is always going to be that budget increase, because that's ultimately, the bottom line. So appreciate the conversation. I hope we can have it.
Fred?
And I can appreciate what you're saying about the budget increase. The only issue with that is the vast sum of our funds are increasing far slower than a 2.5% rate because of the whole Hartman situation with Chapel 70 funding. So it's a moving target, and I can respect what the towns have done, or at least the town of Whitman, I'm speaking for the town of Whitman, is with their Madden report, they've identified what they can afford within what they know of their revenue streams, et cetera, an increase to the assessment that they receive from us. And then we sort of have to put it into a budgetary number and an overall budget. It's a moving target, and it's compounded by the fact that our state aid does not increase at the same 2.5%. So a 3% budget, increase, and you say, okay, well, let's say even the towns were 50-50, it's not going to be 3%, or 6%. It's not going to be that. It's going to be worse because the state portion doesn't go up that quick. And that's a large portion, it's $25 million. So, we're compounded with that as well. It's never fun this time of year, so to speak. And we do have needs. And, looking at from the school side of things, there are needs that the pupils have. Education's changing, it changes daily. I mean, heck, I know it's nowhere, perhaps one of the older characters, but it's nowhere what it was when I was a kid. And I venture to say school today is nowhere what it was when my kids went here. Things are changing rapidly. And we have to try and advance. We have to try and move things forward.
Mr. Hickey, did you?
Jeff, I might be way off base, but I sit here at a lot of these meetings and I don't speak because sometimes I think the question I'm going to ask isn't up to par with the group I'm sitting with. I think I'm blessed to be sitting here with so many dedicated volunteers to come out on a night like this. But to me, it kind of goes back, and Justin, just do me a favor and shake your head if I'm talking too much, okay? Because Monday night, it was one of the things we talked about. And it sounds to me like it's really as simple as the chicken and the egg type thing, where you're waiting to get information from the town, let's say in October of 2022, to present something to the district, to the board, to the school committee, and to the finance committee members and the board of selectmen in January. But you're not getting those numbers in October, preliminary numbers, which you've said many times tonight, which you're using, for the budget. But, and it's kind of bringing me to Sean's point where, and maybe I'm going to say it's not the school's fault or the district's fault or the school committee's fault, maybe it's the town's fault. Maybe it's the selectmen's fault, maybe it's the select board's fault, town administrator's fault, but we don't have the numbers projected for you in October to use for us in January. Where I get it where, maybe there's and I don't really want to use the word, but another committee that has to sit down and figure out what are we going to use? Because like Chris, I don't like it either when it's 3.5% or 4% for other departments, and the district is getting 1 or 2%. It doesn't make sense. If it's all 4% or all 3%, then the school, the district being our biggest employee, they're going to get the most money. That's the most money where our budget is going. But we have to start somewhere. So, and I mean, it was just like, you haven't done it yet, Justin, so that's good. So it's just like Monday night starting out where we had to start somewhere, and maybe it is up to us that next October, we sit down with the finance committee as, a select group and say, what are we forecasting for our future so that we can say to the district, this is what we have, here you go. Can you work with it? And maybe that's the point. And I know we can't fix it tonight or right now, but at some point we have to start, it has to change. And I think that's why, okay.
I was just going to jump in and
try to add a note of optimism there. Compared to the meeting that we had equivalent to this last year, Mr. Hickey's still here. He walked out.
Last year you walked
We are
out.
making a lot of progress.
Yes, right?
We are making a lot of progress, and whether it's looking at the regional agreement or just having, this is what, 5 boards and committees together talking about the budget in January, we're moving in the right direction. And I do think that for Whitman, our budget forecasting is going to get better every year that Sean is on our board. He's been pushing it to be a citizen sitting in the room.
Yep, I know.
So,
But you're not using the microphone, no one can hear you.
no, but I think we're making a lot of really good progress here. I think it's difficult to change this large of an organization between 2 towns and the school district, but I do see a lot of improvement from when I first got involved. So thank you to everyone for coming out on a Thursday night.
I was going to say on that note, Mr. Boyce, that was a good note. Don't be an extender.
First, I just met a new Jim Hickey, and I don't know if he was at the same address. I assume he's from Hanson, but thank you very much. And I never doubted you before. You're a good balance in this guy.
And you finished 5th in the we're killing it. This team was killing it.
I'm 9-4, they always finish it.
So,
If we started our school year and we're going on the tour of the buildings and so forth, and we had probably like 2 or 3 students walk in, brand new, weren't even signed up, and they only spoke Portuguese. Last night, this is what 22, 23's been like. Last night, we were on the topic of Portuguese until it ended up with a field trip, and I was ready to propose sending an 8-year-old overseas with some guidance, but maybe not his parents. The point is that that's the first time I've got to say thanks, Fred, this year. So we're on track. These kids are unlimited. They brought to us last night ideas. I said to Dave Forth, I said, they remind me of me being in my own shoes when I was a kid. When I was in that old high school. When I was in Whitman Middle, which was West Middle. When I was in Conley, which was Forest Street, because Mrs. Conley was alive. She was my principal. I mean, it just felt like I stepped, and now they're talking even college, because they're getting college prep courses that are more immersed in the college field. So I don't know what it is, but it's just like great that these kids are coming back out. But they have a lot more that we need to engage with. The languages, we've now got, Nikki's got the pocket translators and so forth. And it's amazing what we're finding. And with that finding, there's always going to be support needs, assistance, and a cost. Now I come as free as you get. I've been doing this for 25 years. And I don't mind it one bit. And I appreciate everyone who is in this room, certainly. But, if we keep the conversations like these going, and we make sure that Jim's here at every meeting, I think we're going to be all right. So thank you.
So I just want to thank everybody for being here. And again, this is preliminary. We'll roll out the budget as a whole with updated documents, more justifications of where we're going on the 1st, and that will continue on through February and March. And I had this dialogue with Mr. Anderson. If the FinComs or both the select board or the board of selectmen want to have me at a meeting without a presentation, but to answer some questions that they have, I'm more than willing to do that. I just didn't want to do 4 separate presentations necessarily. That might adjust on the fly, but Q&A questions, I'd be more than happy to attend a meeting, and you're all more than welcome to attend our meeting on the 1st and moving forward. So thank you. I don't think we need to adjourn. Thank you for coming, and I appreciate it. Thanks.